Snow fell in sheets so thick the world seemed swallowed whole, the prairie erased beneath a blind whiteness. Wind tore at the seams of the small frontier cabin, rattling its door, moaning through every crack like a spirit denied rest. Inside, the woman kept her shoulders hunched near the hearth, feeding the flames with fistfuls of kindling. Smoke clawed upward, coughing through the crooked chimney. The fire was her only companion, and even it seemed ready to surrender. The blizzard had cut her off for days. Hunger gnawed at her belly, but she ignored it. She had learned long ago that endurance was the truest frontier skill, fiercer than any rifle or blade. Loneliness weighed heavier than the cold, though. Silence had grown so complete that the howl of the storm had become a kind of company. Then came the sound that broke it. At first, she thought it a trick of the gale, one more shriek from the throat of the storm. But when she pressed her ear to the door, she heard it again, thin, piercing, and unmistakable. A baby's cry. Her breath caught. She stood frozen, one hand still on the latch. It made no sense. Out there, death waited. Wolves and frost and emptiness. Yet the sound came again, fainter, already fraying against the wind. If she ignored it, the storm would swallow it, and no one would ever know. She threw her coat over her shoulders, seized her lantern, and stepped into the white void. The cold struck like a fist, scalding her lungs with every breath. Snow clawed up her boots, pulled at her skirts. The lantern swayed, its glow devoured by the storm. Still she pressed on, following that fragile wail. It led her to a drift at the edge of the trees, where brush bent low beneath the weight of snow. There, half buried in a shawl of deerskin, lay a tiny bundle. The child's face was pale, lashes webbed with frost, lips trembling blue. Her heart stuttered. Comanche. She knew the dressings, the stitching of the hide. Fear surged through her chest, as sharp as the cold. The frontier carried its stories, raids that left cabins smoldering, settlers slaughtered, children taken. Holding this baby might call down the same fury upon her head. Her hand trembled as she reached. Leave it, some instinct whispered. Walk away. Survival demands it. But the infant cried again, barely a thread of sound, and she felt her decision settle deep as bone. She lifted the child against her chest, tucking it beneath her coat. Its warmth was fragile, but alive. Step by step, she trudged back through the storm, every gust seeming to shove her backward, every flake stinging her face. When at last the cabin loomed from the haze, she stumbled inside, slamming the door against the wind. Firelight spilled across the baby's face, revealing the flutter of breath, the fragile defiance of life. The woman sank to her knees, cradling the child closer. Outside, the blizzard raged on, but it was not the storm that haunted her now. It was the question of what her choice would bring, and what forces might soon follow. When the storm broke, the prairie lay blanketed in silence, its surface crusted with ice that glittered like shattered glass beneath the pale sun. The woman stood in her doorway, the child swaddled close, staring at the white horizon as if expecting an answer to rise from it. None came. Only the creak of frozen wood and the faint rhythm of the baby's breath. Each day settled into a rhythm of labor. She boiled snow for water, tore strips from her own garments to line the baby's bedding, and coaxed milk from the one cow that remained in her shed. The child fed weakly at first, then with growing strength. His cries, once frail as falling snowflakes, became sharper, carrying through the small cabin like arrows. She found herself speaking to him while tending the fire or stitching worn seams, her voice rough from disuse, yet softened by the presence of another soul. She spoke of the cold, of the hunger, of the silence, though he understood none of it. Still, it anchored her. Loneliness had long been her fiercest companion, and now it was broken by this fragile intruder. Yet with every heartbeat, dread pressed harder against her chest. She knew the child's people would not abandon one of their own. Already she imagined their return, faces painted, horses lathered, vengeance clenched in their fists. Her act of mercy had tied her fate to theirs, whether she wished it or not. Signs soon crept across the frozen world. The first was a set of tracks in the snow, hoofprints circling the far edge of her land, too deliberate to belong to a stray horse. The second came at dusk, a dark shape on a ridge, still as a stone against the dying sun, watching until the night consumed it. The third was sound, low, distant, a drumbeat that seemed to echo through the prairie itself, impossible to place, yet undeniable. Fear curled in her gut, but she would not let it master her. Each time the baby whimpered, she pressed her finger to his palm, feeling his tiny grasp close around her. That grip bound her more firmly than chains. She told herself she had chosen rightly, though doubt gnawed at the edges of the conviction. To have left him would have been to damn herself. To save him might yet damn her all the same. One morning, as the snow reflected back the first blaze of dawn, she stepped outside with the child tucked against her chest. On the horizon, where land met sky in a seam of light, thin trails of smoke rose, more than she could count. They smeared the heavens with warning, curling upward like black ribbons. Her breath stilled. The baby stirred against her, shifting restlessly, sensing what she already knew. She whispered into his ear, voice low and steady despite the tremor in her chest. "They're coming." By midday, the horizon swelled with motion, a dark tide spilling across the snow. The woman stood rigid at her cabin door, the child pressed to her chest, as the first riders broke into view. Their horses moved like shadows given flesh, manes whipped by the wind, nostrils venting steam into the cold air. More followed, 10, 20, then 100. Their feathers stark against the white earth. Their faces marked with paint that seemed cut from fire and blood. The thunder of hooves rolled over the prairie, shaking the frozen ground until it filled her ribs like a second heartbeat. She placed the baby in a cradle by the hearth and reached for the rifle leaning against the wall. Her fingers tightened on the stock, then loosened. A rifle against 100 men was nothing but theater, and she would not make this moment one of folly. Instead, she stepped outside, snow crunching beneath her boots, her empty hands lifted slightly to show she held no weapon. The riders fanned around her, circling slow, their eyes sharp and unreadable. Silence thickened, broken only by the huff of horses and the creak of leather. She felt their gaze rake over her, weighing, judging. At last one dismounted, a tall man whose every step seemed rooted in authority. His face was carved with grief beneath its hardness, as though sorrow had hollowed the lines deeper than age. He stopped before her, saying nothing, the space between them taut as wire. She swallowed and turned, retrieving the bundle from inside. The baby stirred, blinking at the sudden light. She held him out, not as a shield, but as an offering. A murmur rippled through the gathered warriors, low as wind in dry grass. The man's eyes flickered, sharp with recognition. His hand trembled only once before he steadied it, brushing a finger across the child's cheek. The sound that followed was not anger but a chant, rising first from his chest, then spreading through the circle. It grew, layered and resonant, until the ground seemed to vibrate with it. The woman's knees threatened to give way, but she stood firm, clutching the child close when the leader gestured for her to hold him longer. She felt the storm of their judgment pressing down on her, the unspoken question that hung heavier than the sky itself. Why had she saved him? What debt, what intent could drive a settler to cradle the blood of her enemies? Snow began to fall again, soft and soundless, drifting between them like ash. The chant slowed, fading into silence. The leader's eyes lingered on her face, searching, as if the truth might be carved there in flesh. Then he stepped back, voice unspoken, his expression unreadable. The circle of riders tightened, their presence a living wall of decision, and she knew the moment of reckoning had only begun. That night, the prairie glowed red with fire. A ring of flames burned outside her cabin, torches planted in the snow, their light casting long, restless shadows of the gathered warriors. The woman stood at the circle's center, her breath rising in clouds, the baby now in the arms of an elder whose face bore the weight of years and sorrow. Around them, the Comanche murmured among themselves, voices sharp and hushed, their judgment pressing in from every side. She was not bound. No rope, no iron held her, only the knowledge that escape would mean death before the first step. The leader moved forward, blade in hand, its edge catching the firelight. He spoke no words she could understand, but the tone was heavy with demand. "Who are you? Why did you take him? What claim do you think you have?" Her mouth was dry, yet she found her voice, steady despite the pounding in her chest. She said nothing of bargains or safety, only the truth. "I heard him crying. I could not leave him to the storm." Her words disappeared into the night, lost on ears that did not share her tongue. Still, the meaning lingered in her gaze, in the way her shoulders refused to bow. The leader stepped closer, raising the blade until it hovered near her throat. The fire cracked, the circle tightened. Her breath steadied. She did not flinch, did not plead. If death came, it would come. But her soul would not carry the stain of abandoning a child. Then the elder shifted, drawing the infant higher in her arms. The child stirred, lids fluttering before opening wide. His tiny hands reached out, not toward the warriors, not toward the man with the blade, but toward the woman who had carried him through the blizzard. A hush fell over the gathering. The gesture was small, fragile, yet it struck with the force of thunder. Warriors lowered their heads. Some pressed fists to their chests, others murmured as though the child's choice was a sign whispered by the spirits. The leader's jaw clenched, eyes burning with conflict. At last he let the blade fall, its tip sinking into the snow with a hiss of extinguished heat. He spoke then, voice low but resonant. His words carried to every ear. Though she could not understand them, she felt their weight. The elder crossed the circle and placed the baby back into her arms. For a moment, the warmth of him burned brighter than the fire itself. Then he was taken again, this time gently, reverently, to be returned to his people. The circle broke. Riders mounted their horses, the night filled with the sound of hooves pounding snow. At the edge of dawn, only silence remained, the prairie vast and empty once more. The woman stood alone, her arms suddenly hollow, yet her spirit steadied by the knowledge that her act had not been in vain. When the sun rose, spilling light across the frozen earth, she turned toward her cabin. It seemed smaller now, but behind its walls a legend had already been born.